Hello, grade 11. This is chapter 11, section 3, and we're discussing the end of the Roman Republic. Now, as you all remember, most people were the plebeians who had small farms as citizens in Rome, and they began to fall into poverty and debt. Why did they start getting poorer? The first reason is that they had to fight in the army, in the Roman army, and they had to leave their farms. Their farms became neglected. No one took care of the soil. No one took care of the crops. So the farms did not have that much of fertile soil. The second reason is that some of the farms were destroyed by the Carthaginians during the Punic Wars. And the third reason is due to reasons 1 and 2. They had no crops to harvest and nothing to eat or nothing to sell. Because they had nothing to harvest or sell, they could not compete with the wealthy families that owned large lands. These people were known as the latifundias. They owned large farms that were known as latifundias. And it grew all the types of crops that the poor farmers could not grow. The wealthy people also used slaves to do their work. Therefore, they did not need the farmers. So, as a result, the poor people who were the farmers lost their land, could not find jobs, and their farmlands were destroyed. On the other hand, Rome's rich people who did not need any of these lands owned a great deal of the land, which were known as latifundias. They had slaves, they owned slaves, and the slaves did the work, so they wouldn't hire the farmers. And this was the great deal, or the great debate between Rome's rich people and poor people. Now, what was wrong with the latifundia? The latifundia, as we said, were large pieces of farms and lands that were owned by Rome's rich elites. The latifundias caused the small farms to shut down. They took all the nutrients in the soil. They grew more crops than the small farms. The small farmers left the countryside to find work in the city. When they went to the city, they also found that the enslaved people did most of the work in the cities. If they ever found a job, it was often low paid. Because the government feared another rebellion and another chaos in the country, the Roman leaders started to offer cheap food and free entertainment. This idea in the government was known as bread and circuses. It was a distraction for the poor people so that they wouldn't rebel and start making problems for the rich people and the government. Now, two brothers, they were known as Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They believed that the problems in Rome were caused by the wealthy people, the elites, and the landowners. They wanted the Senate to take the land from the wealthy latifundias and give it to the small farmers. Both brothers, because they were not supported by the senates and the wealthy people, they got killed for their actions. And still, the senators in the senates owned the latifundias. Now, there were other economic problems in Rome that resulted into other political problems. Now, a Roman general known as Marius changed the military by allowing the poor people to serve. This idea reduced a little bit of the economic problem because now the poor people can apply to the army and they at least can get money and land in return. The Marius's idea helped the unemployment, but it weakened the government. The government did not want any support or anything to do with the poor people. why was this action, or Marius's action, was not supported by the government or was not preferred by the government, or it turned the government into a weak government because the soldiers, who were most of them poor now, they were loyal to the general, not to the Roman Empire. The poor people in Rome still believed that their problem was caused by the country, by the wealthy people, and they believed that Marius was their savior. So their loyalty lied to the general, Marius, not to the country, which is the Roman Empire. Now another general called Sulla opposed Marius. He did not like the idea of poor people uh, into the government and into the military. He drove Marius and his army out of Rome. And then, after Sulla drove Marius and his army, which consisted mainly of the poor people, out of Rome, he named himself as Rome's dictator. As soon as he was the dictator, Sulla reduced the power of the tributes, who were the normal people, and gave more power to the senates, who were mainly the wealthy citizens. And then he gave up his power, hoping that the republic would be strong again and the power would be in the hands of the elites and the rich people again. Now, the problem that Sulla did was that the military leaders started to fight for power. As soon as Sulla started with the idea of naming himself as a dictator, the rest of the military leaders wanted to follow his lead. Now, eventually, after this fight, 3 men ruled the empire together, and when 3 people rule the empire together, we call it a triumvirate. They shared equal power. These 3 men were known as Caesar, Crassus, and Pompey. They were all military leaders, and each member in the triumvirate controlled a certain area in the Roman Empire. This is where we're going to stop for the first part of the lesson. You will find another video that continues the rest of the lesson.